Hi and welcome as we continue to follow Jesus during this Easter week. Jesus is about to be betrayed by one of his 12 disciples. Matthew continues, "While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, 'The one I will kiss is the man. Seize him.' And he came up to Jesus at once and said, 'Greetings, Rabbi,' and he kissed him. Jesus said to him, 'Friend, do what you came to do.' Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, 'Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must be so?' At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, 'Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place, that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled.' Then all the disciples left him and fled. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. And Peter was following him at distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. Now, the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus, that they might put him to death, but they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At least 2 came forward and said, 'This man said, I'm going to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days.' And the high priest stood up and he said, 'Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?' But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, 'I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God.' Jesus said to him, 'You have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his robes and said, 'He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You have now heard this blasphemy. What is your judgment?' They answered, 'He deserves death.' Then they spit in his face and struck him. And some slapped him, saying, 'Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?' Now, Jesus was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came up to him and said, 'You also were with Jesus the Galilean.' But he denied it before them all, saying, 'I do not know what you mean.' And when he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, 'This man was with Jesus of Nazareth.' And again he denied it with an oath, 'I do not know the man.' After a little while, The bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Now when the morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate, the governor. Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." They said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed and he went and hanged himself. From this point, Pilate did all he could to not find Jesus guilty. The Jews had accused Jesus of blasphemy, but as part of a pagan state, a Roman official would pay little heed to a Jewish religious law. So the chief priests said that they had found Jesus perverting the nation and forbidding taxes to Caesar and declaring himself Christ a king. Pilate tried to get out of making a decision by sending Jesus to Herod to make a decision. But Herod sent him straight back. Eventually, Pilate told the chief priest that he could not find fault with Jesus and he would release him, as was the custom to release one prisoner at Passover. Mark then explains what happened next. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. And he answered them saying, "Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was not of envy, that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him released for them, Barabbas instead. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas. And having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. What a day. Peter had been insistent in his usual brash manner that he was prepared to die for Jesus. Yet when faced with his own perilous situation, he denied Jesus, just as Jesus said he would. Pilate was a weak man, playing to the crowd, not doing the right thing, but doing the popular thing while putting the blame on others. And when the crowd, whose emotions were whipped up to a frenzy, even though they had seen Jesus healing people and had heard his teachings, how many of us can say we have not at some time done the same things? When the going gets tough, how many people will deny Christ? Just like Peter. Thank you for watching today's video. I'll see you for the next one. God bless you and goodbye.